We'll get a Manchester perspective from the musician and writer John Robb. But first, let's go to Westminster, where we're joined by the former Chancellor, Alistair, who was the first significant Labour figure to call for HS2 to be scrapped. You proved it in the beginning, then you wanted it scrapped. How are you tonight, Alistair?
Well, as I said in the summer, my concern is that if you spend so much money on one line, one of the consequences will be that you'll take money out of the other railway lines that the country needs. Now, you've just done an interesting piece there on what's happening in continental Europe. Yes, they do have a lot of high-speed trains, but if you go off the high-speed train routes and you look at some of the other lines, they're not so well and so heavily used as ours are. We have one of the most heavily used train networks anywhere in the world. That's one of the reasons that as a result of the investment the Labour government put in, actually, in the last 15 years, we have more people travelling by train than we have at any time since the Second World War. And my concern about this, and I'm glad the government is shifting its argument now from the speed element to capacity, because frankly capacity is probably the stronger argument here. But we've got to look at the implications for the rest of the network. On Monday they said, well, if you do something on the East Coast line, it's going to be disrupted for years to come. Are they honestly saying we're not going to spend money on the East Coast main line? Because we need to spend money on the East Coast main line.
Can I pause you and take you from your old transport portfolio to your old Chancellor portfolio? It's surely a fallacy to suggest that there is some golden pot of 50 billion, which if you didn't spend it on HS2 would be spent on the rail network. Surely the fact is you either spend this money and it will be conjured from somewhere, and then there's still the money being spent on the railways. The idea that this is somehow going to sap railway spending surely is a fallacy.
No, you are right. There isn't £50 billion in the Halifax just waiting to be spent or anything like that. This is money that the government would have to borrow to fund its investment. But the government, all governments have a choice between where, if they're going to borrow to invest, where they choose to make that investment. And, I do speak with my old transport hat on, if you like, because, I will yield to no one in my enthusiasm for improving rail communications throughout the whole of the country. Not just in the London to other parts of the country corridors.
But you must admit, Alistair, it doesn't look very good if you've had all these months, if not years, to work out what is best for Britain. If the Labour Party is going to wait now until the middle of the spring, if not later, before making up its mind, and the government's made it clear if they don't get bipartisan support for this, it won't happen.
Well, look. I think the position of the Labour Party front bench is one that I'm quite happy with. But my argument here all along has been, we do need to spend more money on our railways. I mean, I know as a former Transport Secretary what happens when you don't spend money. The West Coast Main Line hadn't had money spent on it for 30 years. And yes, it was disruptive when it was being done up, but the line is much, much better, infinitely better than it was then, and it's very, very heavily used. I understand too the argument about increasing capacity, but it's not just between London and the English regions, it's also between the big English cities. It's the links between north and south of the country.
You're not swung by your Labour colleagues who run these cities.
Of course.
The Labour Mayor of Liverpool, the Labour Mayor of Manchester.
I understand perfectly the concern they have about improving links. That's why, when I was Transport Secretary, I agreed to spend £8 billion improving the routes between Liverpool, Manchester and Glasgow and London. That was a very, very good investment. Now, I'm not arguing against more capacity, right. Far from it. What I'm saying is that we do need to have a careful look at the consequences if you spend so much money on one line, when I know for a fact we are going to have to spend money within the same timescale on the East Coast Main Line, on the line down to Bristol, the London commuter services and so on. That's the issue. And I think, if we would, I also think, by the way, a political consensus is important. But I would like to get one. But I do think the government needs to look at what else we need to be doing so we just understand the whole picture rather than one part of it.
Alistair, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, now let's go to Manchester and to John Robb, and let's see what your perspective is, John. You're a Mancunian. I don't know how much you travel up and down to London on the train, or whether you ever take the plane.
Well, I've come down to London about once or twice a week, and I love the idea of the high-speed train. I think we're living in a situation now, if the cities get further and further apart, because the timescale of moving about is not a good thing. we've got to be looking at like 2040, 2050. We don't want to be a backwater. The north has to be joined onto Europe. The idea, and also going to Glasgow and Edinburgh, if this thing gets built all the way through.
What about Alistair?
Great transport infrastructure. It's really important.
What about Alistair Darling's point that if you spend on this expensive process of getting a bit quicker to London or Edinburgh or whatever, it won't be Edinburgh, but it certainly will be London, then you're going to sap the sort of money that might go into Transpennine, might go into trains to Liverpool and to more local areas.
Yeah, but the idea, if you get people moving up and down the country, the local areas get joined on as well. I think it's a really important thing. I think we should be thinking in 21st century terms. We're a 21st century country. We shouldn't be using a Victorian infrastructure to move ourselves around the country anymore. It seems ridiculous. You know, it's already creaking, it's already overcrowded. I think a faster system is better. The idea you can go to London in an hour is really great. It's good for business. It's good for...
Let me pause you there, because I know you wouldn't be tempted to do this, but there would be people who would start to just live in Manchester and commute to London, thereby sapping Manchester of another good job.
But my idea of it is, I think it should be like cheaper as well. I think the trains are very overpriced now anyway, and it should be something for all people to use. It should be a people's network. You just have to talk to people who run the surrounding towns of Manchester, like Wigan or Manchester itself, the Labour people who run these towns and cities, and they're very pro the HS2 for very good reason. Because we don't want to be a city that's cut off from the rest of Europe and cut off from London in 10, 20 years' time by using a really rickety, knackered old rail network. We want our share. And the longer we talk about this, the longer we debate it, the more expensive it's going to get. And it's like we're going backwards. At least in the Victorian times, where people complain about these things as well, but we still had the ideas, and we could actually carry these ideas through.
John?
Nowadays, what's happened to this country? We can't even make our minds up about anything.
John Robb, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.